Welcome to Someone's Gotta Drive. I want to have a trigger warning for those who this may trigger hard. There is domestic violence, drug abuse, sexual abuse, things that are not very kosher to speak of in front of children or may be triggering. In the last episode, I talk about how my ex-husband was told by my mother that I left him for another man and cheated on him when I didn't. I also talk about how my mother proceeded to overdose on fentanyl patches by licking them. Well, as that 6 months had gone on, I continued to work hard, pay my dad rent every month for living there. My ex's car, it kept breaking down. So now we were down to one car, and I would borrow my mom's from time to time to get back and forth to work. Sometimes I would drive all the way to Exton, Pennsylvania to drop my ex off at school, go to work, and then go back that night to go pick him up again because we had one car. Sometimes I was driving 6 hours round trip to work 4 hours for that evening. It wasn't always easy, but I was trying to make it work. For my husband's birthday, I threw a big party. Everyone came. My dad even came over, helped me clean up the house and do some landscape work to make the house look more presentable. Same for my mother's birthday, and same for my sister's birthday. That year, in October, for my birthday, I just wanted a few friends to come over. It was a horrifically rainy day. My sister came up from Virginia, got a cake with a raven on it, because I'm a Ravens fan when it comes to football. And I just wanted like a pajama night where we had pajamas on, watched movies, ate cake, just had some fun. But due to the rain, some of my friends said, sorry, we're not getting out in this. It was like torrential downpours. And my dad didn't even answer the phone. It's like, are we going to see you tonight? No answer. It really hurt. Here I was paying rent that I wasn't supposed to be paying in the first place because I'm taking care of mom. Here I am taking care of mom, working my butt off, doing all the right things. You can't swing by for some dinner and cake when you're invited to. You've done it for everyone else. That was a really sad birthday. That Thanksgiving, a month later, I felt like everything was just kind of crumbling. At one point in the past 6 months, my mom's friend had come up from Alabama and proceeded to ask my mom, what's wrong here? What's going on? And one day during dinner at 9:30 at night, my mother, high as a kite, her friend decides to try to play psychiatrist. And so one night at 9:30 at night, while I'm trying to eat my dinner after working a long day, she looks at my mom and says, why don't you tell your daughter what your problems are? Why you have problems with her? And the first thing my mother said was, well, I think she's sleeping with her father, my adopted father. And I was so thoroughly disgusted that I actually told her friend, you're not here all the time. You come up here for a few days from Alabama and you take a look at what's going on and think you know everything based off of what she said. But what you don't hear all the time is all the drug overdoses and the misuse of her drugs and alcohol. And even now, you're trying your best to let's air the grievances. But don't you see that my mother is high as a kite? Don't you see that she is not within sound mind? And now you just want to start crap? I remember crying my eyes out that night. My mother thought I was sleeping with my father? That's the last thing I needed. So that next morning, without even a goodbye, just a note, she left in the middle of the night. She said, obviously I caused more harm than good. I'm going to go home now. And she drove home. So that Thanksgiving, I had struggled hard. My mom had been overdosing. My ex-husband was going back and forth, long drives to his school, and I was trying to make it all work. And I start realizing something just isn't right. Every few weeks, I would get these overdraft notices from my bank. And this was before we had like online banking that was really prevalent. And I kept having these overdraft notices and owing $300 to the bank. And I would, talk to my ex about it. And I would say like, hey, what's going on here? And like, I don't know what you're talking about. And like I said, I wouldn't get a notice about anything until way after the fact. It'd be like a notice in the mail. And I knew I wasn't taking money out like unnecessarily. I had all my bills budgeted. I had an allowance budgeted for him as well. I was really tight with my money. So I really couldn't understand what was going on. And then one day I had had enough of it. And I said, that's it. You and I have to go to the bank and we have to get this sorted out with the bank manager because there is no way I'm making $1,300 a week and having an overdraft of $300 a week. Like, where in the world is this money going? So we go to the bank and we sit down with the manager and she pulls up a statement and she says, okay, so it looks like, yeah, you're right. You're paying all your bills. You're managing your money well. And then all of a sudden there's an ATM withdrawal for like $200. And I'm like, where? And she's like, it says Exton, Pennsylvania. And I look at my ex-husband and I said, why are you withdrawing extra money and not telling me about it? Like, what the heck? And he's like, oh, well, sometimes I need gas or I need food and I'm like, that makes no sense. Not only do I make sure the vehicles are filled up every day, like that we have plenty of gas, I make sure you have plenty of food. You also get $100 a week allowance on top of all of this to make sure you don't need anything. And so I'm like, that's it. You can't have access to the bank account anymore because like, seriously, where is it going? And he has no answer. And the bank manager is just like, eek, so I finally get it under control. But now the holidays are hitting. And I've been paying a lot. I mean, probably at least $1,000 in that duration of overdraft fees because he kept taking money out and not knowing what was in it or probably not caring because with a bank, you can check the balance. So Thanksgiving hits and my mom and dad are waiting for me to come home from work right before Thanksgiving. And I'm like, is everything okay? And they're like, we need you to open the safe. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, your mother thinks that you're taking her pills. And I'm like, I'm not. I come home every day. I go to her safe. I give her her pills. When I put her pills in her pill box, we do it at the dinner table. She watches, she counts, I was a complete open book with my mother when it came to her pills. So that way she would trust me with them. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so we get her pain pills out of the safe and we start counting them. And sure enough, she's short. And my dad looks at me and goes, are you taking her pills? And I'm like, God, no. Like, hasn't anyone known me now for 25 years at this point? Like, is the last thing I care to do. Like, no, I am not taking her pills. Shortly after that, my ex comes home from school. And he's in my room and I said, let me go talk to him. So I go downstairs And I said, hey, my parents are here. And they counted my mother's pills, more specifically her oxycodone. And there are some missing, like a week's worth missing. And he just looks at me and goes, well, it's your fault. What are you talking about? It's your fault. You let me have a key of the safe. You think that a recovering addict isn't going to access something that they have access to? Are you telling me that you took my mother's pills? Well, yeah. It's your fault. You gave me a key to the safe. Oh my God. I said, you're going to need to stay down here. And I walk up the stairs to the kitchen, white as a ghost, and said, oh my God, he took her pills. And they look at me and say, well, now you have a choice. It's either him or us, but he's got to leave this house right now. And I said, oh, no doubt he has to leave this house right now, but we only have one vehicle. So I need to remove him myself from this house so I can at least have my vehicle. And I proceeded to pack up some things that night because it was late and I knew I was going to have to drive him to his mother's house, which was an hour away. And I didn't know if I would be able to make it back that night. And I remember being like, I hate to say this. I don't know who I'm going to pick right now. And my parents were just completely shocked. What do you mean? It should be a no-brainer. You should be choosing your mother over him if that's not what you want in life. And I'm like, yeah, but here's the deal. He at least sobered up. He at one point sobered up. Mom refuses to sober up. Mom refuses to go to rehab. Mom refuses to try. So I really have to think about this. As we're driving now at 10:30 at night out to his mom's house, he's like, this is your fault. You shouldn't have given me the key. And I'm like, the key was on the car key ring, which, yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe I shouldn't have trusted you with it. But I thought that was the point behind marriage and sobriety, was trying to trust you. And, you know, I have a really big decision I have to make, and I'm about to be homeless because the decision I make means that I may have to leave my parents. And so we went to his mom's house. I don't even remember if I told her what happened, just that we needed to spend the night that night. And so we did. And the next day, I remember talking with my dad and saying, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to pick my husband over mom. And he was like, but you're supposed to pay me $400 a month in rent. How am I supposed to afford this mortgage? So you should have thought about that when I asked for your help when it came to getting mom into rehab, and when I asked if I could stay with you, and you said no. I said, you should have thought about that when I'm the one making all the sacrifices and doing everything I can. And I've been thrown to the wolves. Unfortunately, I understand the situation, but he's saying he's going to get help and get sober. And I can't argue with it because he's done it before. So yeah, he will do it again. Where mom has said she would go and get sober and then will literally look you straight in the face and say, I just said what I had to say, get out of the hospital. And he was like, how dare you? And I remember that year was probably the worst of my life. I remember being at work and then being like, are you okay? And what do you say? You're not really supposed to let personal and work mix. And, you know, I had to tell them my mom is a drug addict and so is my husband. And I am surrounded by nothing but drug addicts. And the company I worked for also hired people in recovery to help them get better lives and to get themselves back on their feet. And so it's not like they didn't understand, but it was like, what do you do? And they were like, well, yeah, you're right. You're stuck. And they even said, I wouldn't pick your mom, but I definitely wouldn't be with your husband either. But at that point, what was I supposed to do? I had to tell my company I could no longer work for them because they were too far away. We only had one vehicle, and, well, my ex had to use it to get to school and back. I was sure I could find work elsewhere. In the meantime, I was borrowing either my mom's car or my ex-mother-in-law's car to get back and forth to work, working for a local Applebee's, trying to get my insurance license, trying to do whatever I could to make money. And I remember my ex-mother-in-law who said, you left my son for the first time and you should be lucky that I even let you back in this family. And the only reason why I'm letting you back in this family is because you're working your ass off to make sure that he is taken care of and that he's going to school, and you're doing so much for him. I remember trying to bust my butt and do everything right at this Applebee's, and the manager just did not like me. He had it out for me. And then at the end of every shift, because you would get like half price appetizers, I would stay at the restaurant for an extra hour or two, and I would sit at the bar and have like spinach and artichoke dip and a beer and try to just comprehend what the hell had just happened in the past year. I had left Arizona. I had been living a life for me. And granted, it wasn't exactly the best, and it was a little scary, and it felt almost cult-like. But at this point, that was looking so much better than the hell that I was in. I was living with my ex-mother-in-law. I didn't have a place of my own. My ex had been stealing my mother's pills. I couldn't even go home for the holidays. I was just lost and in such a bad depression because somehow I'm still at the center of all of this. If I don't work, he doesn't get to school, he doesn't survive. And if I were to have stayed with my mom, she would have just kept ODing and treating me like crap too. And now I have nowhere to go and nothing to do about it. Well, my ex-mother-in-law was still on that Section 8 housing, and if anyone found out that we were staying with her, she would lose it. So she asked her landlord, being the house next to her was vacant, if we could rent from him. I didn't have any money up front, and he said he would take security deposit in payments. I was so thankful. That year for Christmas, I was able to get a roof over my head that I could call my own. I had since reached out to my biological father because I didn't know what else to do. And I explained to him the situation. And the first thing he said was, well, let me call your mom. Well, for one reason or another, my mom actually ended up in the hospital that year for Christmas. And so he was like, well, your mom's in the hospital. You are a blithering mess. And he took a bus from Alabama. Took him 2 days. But he took a bus from Alabama to Maryland to make sure I was okay, to help me move all my stuff out of my mother's house, and to help me get set up in my new place. No one else was willing to do that. Not even my adopted father, when I asked him for help. Once I felt like my life was getting back in order, I decided to try to go back and work for the construction company I worked for closer to my mom. I made decent money at the time. I left during the holidays, but maybe now that the holidays are done, maybe I'll actually make some good money. Doesn't mean that my anxiety was under control at all, but I tried. I could barely eat. And when we started off with this place, I was able to get some food stamps. I was able to get a little bit of assistance. And so I was like, okay, I'm getting onto the right path. A friend of ours also needed a place to stay, and we had a 2-bedroom place. So I decided to say, you know what, if you help with rent and utilities, sure, you can live here. I go to work. I went one day to the grocery store and used those food stamps, filled up my refrigerator for the month. Felt good. I came home that night. My fridge was empty. It was all gone. And the person that we had said was okay to stay and live there had eaten all the food. And I said, what the hell, man? That was a month's worth of food. Where did it all go? And he said, well, I'm a big guy. It takes a lot to fill me up. I said, yeah, but I'm 100 pounds soaking wet. I'm starving and you ate all my food. He locked himself in his room that night and moved out the next day. I thought I was starting off right with assistance, with food, but the paychecks weren't really great. I was barely making rent. The food was gone. The car was breaking down. And on top of it, the temporary registration had failed. So I'm now driving a vehicle with dead registration, expired registration. It has insurance on it. But if I get pulled over for the registration being expired, I could lose my car and I could lose my license. And sure enough, at 10 o'clock at night, right in front of the neighborhood that wasn't great, but I lived in it, I got pulled over. And the reason why? The registration had expired. That state trooper was so kind. He even said to me, he said, look, you don't live in a great neighborhood, and it's literally right around the corner. I'm not even going to let you walk that. But I will say this. Drive to your house, you park your car, and you don't get back in it again until the registration gets renewed. I was very thankful of that cop that night because he was right. It wasn't a great neighborhood. I drove the car to my house. I parked it, walked in my house, and honestly, I knew I didn't have a choice. I was going to have to keep driving it back and forth to work, which didn't help with my anxiety at all either. So here I was trying to get my ex to school, me to work, trying to pay the bills. He wasn't working at all. Finally, I just had a nervous breakdown. I ended up in court and was given a STET docket. That STET docket meant that as long as I didn't get in any trouble for the next 3 years, they would expunge my record for driving with expired registration. I remember going to the hospital one night after work because my anxiety was so bad that I thought I was having a heart attack. And sure enough, I was. All the stress of what had been going on over the past year had hit me so bad that my heart was giving me problems. I was malnourished, not eating. And at the same time, guess who was also at the ER? My mother. My mother had actually tried walking along a retaining wall, dropping trash into the trash cans. She didn't have her footing right, and she fell off of a 8-foot retaining wall onto the driveway, breaking her neck, her ribs, her shoulder. It was not great. Thankfully, I had actually left my address as my dad's address because the county that we lived in had something called the Mobile Crisis Unit. And if you were going through a depression, anxiety, or suicidal situation, the county actually paid for you to get help. So, on top of the heart problem, they decided that I needed some psychiatric intervention. Within 48 hours, I was seeing a psychiatrist, and after that, therapy. The county paid for medication and told me I wasn't allowed to work for a while. I wasn't allowed to work for at least a month while the medication set in. And that's when my ex finally said, okay, fine. I will have to quit school because someone's got to work and we got to figure this out. I promise I'll take care of you. Of all the things that I've put you through, let me do this for you. So it started my hiatus of not leaving the house, becoming a recluse. I would not step foot out my front door for 6 weeks. The only way that he could actually get me out the house after 6 weeks was to take me to the library and let me get some books. And that was the only way I was able to escape. Reading.